Welcome to the Global Missions Podcast, a show for Christ followers who want to participate more effectively in God's work, both at home and to the ends of the earth. This episode is brought to you by the Global Missions Toolbox, a new collection of trusted resources to help clarify and strengthen your participation in global missions. Visit us online at globalmissionstoolbox.com. And now, here's your host, Rob Magwood, better known to many friends as Mags.
Hi, everyone. I'm really looking forward to today's episode. It touches me personally because I've been part of this particular conference in the past. Today, we will be highlighting how the upcoming Urbana 18 Global Missions Conference can help inform and inspire and equip local churches. This conference takes place just once every 3 years, so we encourage you to listen and consider how you and your church might participate in this amazing event. Our guest today is Lynda MacGibbon, who serves as the Vice President of Communications, Marketing, and Arts for InterVarsity in Canada. It's quite a mouthful, Lynda.
It is.
That's a long title. Does it fit on one business card or?
You know, it does. It does. We joke that I should have 3 separate ones depending on which area we're discussing. But actually, all 3 of them are really tied together in helping us figure out how we tell the story of what God is helping us do in and through ministry in Canada. And sometimes through communications, sometimes we're marketing. And actually, arts engagement is pretty critical when you're working with students.
Very good. That would be an interesting topic for another day, perhaps.
Yeah, I have a great team I work with.
Today, we are going to talk about one of the most exciting events, I think, that will take place with regard to global missions from North America. This year, it is the Urbana Conference. And Lynda, working with InterVarsity, has been involved with Urbana for some time, first attended in 1979 as a first-year university student from a small town in Newfoundland, our easternmost province in Canada, and she has participated often since that time. It has lit her passion for God's kingdom and increased her faith, made her bolder in sharing her beliefs. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mags. I am also looking forward to it. Urbana is dear and near to my heart, and I'm passionate about what God is going to do there this December.
Well, we're looking forward to it. Just before we get to Urbana, please tell us just a little bit about your role with InterVarsity and how you're serving there now.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I do have a bit of a mouthful in my title. I lead the communications, marketing, and arts team. And our focus is really how do we share the news of what God is doing in and through our ministry. University in Canada is ministering to students in high schools and universities. And we also run 9 camps. So through the summer, we put about 10,000 young kids through camp from age 5 to age 25 when they're still working with us. So in both those places, we're really focused on how do we help young people understand God's love for them and then how to live as his disciples in the world today. My job is really fun because I get to tell the stories of what happens. And Urbana is one of those stories.
And that's important to note. InterVarsity has a broad ministry over that range you mentioned from 5 to 25. This is a really important piece this year. So let's begin into Urbana with a really important foundational question. What is Urbana?
Urbana is a gathering of about 16,000 mostly young people, but not all young people. It's held every 3 years in St. Louis, Missouri now at the end of December. And the goal is to mobilize a generation of students, a generation of young people, to give their whole lives to global mission. This is the 50th conference. The first one was actually held in Toronto in 1946. I like to also say Urbana is 5 days of multicultural, multi-ethnic worship. It's a place of deep Bible study and deep Bible learning. It's a place where hundreds of mission agencies and seminar leaders come together to help young people take concrete steps into active discipleship and active mission.
Well, it's a great description. And here, I guess maybe I'll just tuck in my personal experience. I've been to Urbana twice, and one of those times was the last conference at the end of 2015. And even as you kind of share those ideas, you mentioned the multi-ethnic worship. It was a highlight. Workshops, that was a highlight. The Bible teaching, that was a highlight. It just brings some of those things back so powerfully.
Yeah, I don't know if you had this experience, Mags, but I think Urbana is a place where God interrupts people, where he kind of catches their attention and he broadens their perspective on the needs of the world here in North America, but well beyond North America. And I think it's a place where God awakens compassion and he helps people understand that they have something they can give to the world to help God do the work he's wanting to do in the world. It shows them how they can be a solution to the world's needs.
That's good.
So it's a pretty significant place.
And I want to mention here the dates of this year's Urbana again. I know you've said when it is, but I just want to emphasize it in case anybody's at the beginning of this recording and you're even thinking about it. It's this December of 2018, December 27th through 31st, 2018. So between Christmas and New Year's in St. Louis. Just talk a little bit about registration.
Sure, absolutely. So the easiest way to register is go directly to urbana.org. It'll tell you everything you need to do. But we are actively recruiting and registering students and non-students even today. So we're praying for 16,000 delegates at this Urbana, and we're not there yet. So we're really hopeful that lots of people are still making decisions about what they will do this Christmas and whether or not they might be open to, after Christmas Day, going off to spend the next 5 days as part of God's global church.
And people come from far and wide. Some fly, many take buses. I met students from Vancouver, British Columbia, who made bus trips across North America. Lots of Canadians participate in this, so just encourage you to consider that at this time.
Absolutely. We're praying for 2,000 Canadians, and we organize buses that take people to Urbana. So if there are folks out there listening that are interested, we'll give some information about how to get in touch with us at the end. But we are happy to help people get to Urbana.
That's great. The InterVarsity team wants to help remove barriers, and so I encourage you to consider this. If you know students that might consider it, encourage them to check it out, share the link with them. And here I'm going to come to a really important question. Lynda, is Urbana just for students?
Mags, Urbana is for anyone who wants to hear God's call on his or her life. The primary audience is students, and so the speakers will often reference the students and young adults recently out of university or college who are there. But really, there are many other people who attend Urbana. So I know pastors who bring dozens of people from their churches, young adults, students, other non-young adults, we'll call them. They show up at Urbana. I've met parents who choose to go to Urbana with their young adult children and go as a family to discern what's God saying to each one of them. And I've met grandparents at Urbana because they're actually asking God, what do you want me to do in this next chapter of my life? Urbana is a place where they can hear directly from God through the speakers about options for them in terms of what they might do with the rest of their life, and perhaps be inspired by the young people that are there as delegates and their enthusiasm and have some hope for the world. But yeah, it's for all ages.
Now, there are these big plenary sessions when everyone comes together, but there are a lot of workshops and things. What are some of the things that have been built in that make the conference accessible for people who are not students?
Yeah, that's a great question. Urbana divides itself up into the main plenary sessions and then lots and lots of workshops, as you've already mentioned, as well as an exhibit hall of about 200 mission agencies who come to be available to the delegates. It also is organized into a series of tracks, which people can choose to be in, or they can just do Urbana sort of generally as a whole conference. There's a track on business as mission. There's a track on justice. And so people who are particularly concerned about how to live their lives as faithful believers in the business world, or who want to think more about how to bring about justice in their world, might be interested in tracks like that. And in addition to that, there is a ministry and missions leadership track. And that's designed specifically for pastors, denominational leaders, anybody else who's serving in some kind of ministry leadership role. You might be a deacon in your church, or you might be part of a missions committee in your church. And you would walk through the whole Urbana experience in the company of people who are also coming from those worlds. So you form a bit of a cohort.
During the plenary sessions, there are great Bible study times. This year, the theme is taken from the book of Revelation. Can you just tell us, how did the team come to decide on Revelation this time?
At Urbana, scripture is central to everything that happens. So we know the big frame of the conference, but every time the planning for Urbana begins, the place we begin is in the discernment of what scripture does God want us to lay as the foundation for the whole conference. So when Urbana 15 ended, a group of InterVarsity leaders began to gather and pray and ask, what book for Urbana 18? And there would be several books that would rise to the surface. The book of Revelation was one of those. And through prayer, through discernment, through conversation, ultimately the decision was made that Revelation is the book for Urbana 18. as we have been working through all the plans for Urbana, and I've been part of the Urbana program team, so I've been heading down to the States to join that team and planning this, we've been increasingly aware of how God might use this particular book of scripture with this particular generation of students. So, Revelation is an epic book. It's poetic. It's full of visual imagery. And we've been noting that in this age that we are in, and in the realities of some of the secularization of North America, Revelation may be an extremely important book for young people who have been raised on great epics and on imaginative movies and epic kinds of stories, that they actually might resonate with Revelation in a way that's different from past generations of students. So we actually think that it's a book that is going to catch hold of the imaginations of students and delegates and the other delegates at Urbana, and that they will see Jesus in a new and different way. And that they also might have a renewed hope in a world that often seems quite dark to young people today.
Well, appreciating the value the Lord has brought to young people, I'd like to lift this discussion about the local church and maybe the not so young people, I think you called them. When we talk about the benefits or the opportunity for local churches, what are some of the things that come to mind brightly for Urbana's offering?
First off, I think worship comes to mind for me because at Urbana, we truly are worshiping as the global church. We're praising God through songs in many languages: Korean, Spanish, Chinese, Arabic, Swahili, and English. And we're led in worship by people who come from all parts of the world and have quite a significant experience in worshiping in all parts of the world. So this Urbana worship leader is a man by the name of Eric Lage, and Eric is part of the Ethnos Church, which is a multicultural church from around the world. He's involved in a church in the States. So we're being led by people who are thinking about the global church and how our worship helps us think that we are not a small church in a small community in a small part of Canada or the United States, but we're actually part of all nations. And Revelation speaks to that. All nations gathering around the throne of God, praising God. I think Urbana is like that.
That's good. I was just at a conference a couple of weeks ago where Eric was leading worship.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah. And it was something else. I've got to say, this gentleman will encourage your heart. In many cases, he'll get you up out of your seat.
That's right.
And it is a treat to hear him use his gifts and to sing. Oh, my lands. It was wonderful. The whole team was there. The Urbana worship team was at this conference.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, you've heard them and I haven't heard them all. But as you saw, we have Latino members of the team. There's a Canadian member on the team. People bringing all their gifts.
It's going to be great. It'll be great. Okay, so ethnic worship is something you have in mind. What else for a local church? Why would they attend?
Yeah, so the ethnic worship, let me just say this, it doesn't stay at Urbana. So 9 years ago, I was part of a church in Eastern Canada that sent a delegation of 5 young people to Urbana. And they loved the multi-ethnic, multicultural worship. So when we came back, they taught the church several songs. And one of the songs they taught was in Korean. I think a seed was planted in that church through the worship in that Korean song. Because today, that church has opened up its building so a Korean congregation can also worship in it. And they're offering ESL programs. So, I can't make the direct link perfectly, but I actually believe that what happened as we began to sing praises to God in another language, and it's largely a Caucasian church in Eastern Canada, something was planted in the hearts of people that broadened into a different kind of ministry for that church today, and actually a partnering with another church in the one building. Worship doesn't just stay at Urbana, it goes home with the delegates, and it really changes people's hearts, I believe.
That's good.
On another note, in terms of what benefits Urbana can bring to the local church, I think it's the nature of the speakers of Urbana. So they come from all over the world, as you know, and this is really a gift to the local church as people go back home and share the teaching that they have heard from Urbana. Many churches help young people get to Urbana by providing scholarships and transportation and praying for them. And I know that many delegates go back home to their local churches and share what they've learned. And what they're often sharing is, I heard a pastor from Africa speak. This year, they will hear Pastor Rene Bruel. He's Brazilian and he's church planting in Rome. And he's the main Bible expositor. So he will be teaching us daily from Revelation. So a Brazilian who's living in Rome teaching Revelation has got to have an impact on those delegates as they go back. So I think the speakers are incredibly important.
Well, I got to resist going into my personal experience, but I just again would say you will be blessed if you have the opportunity to be part of this group and from your church. Lynda, you also talked just how this can bring energy to a church, right? When these people come home from Urbana, it impacts the church.
It does. So there's a pastor from the Chinese Community Church, Pastor Kinson Liang, who first attended Urbana in 1987 as a young man. It's actually there, he says, where he stopped fighting the Lord about missional call in his life and decided to enter the ministry. He specifically said to me, Urbana gives a taste of eternity. And imagine if members of churches come home with a taste of eternity in their hearts, what that would do. So I just think it energizes those who come to bring back what they've heard. It is like a taste of heaven. And so when you've seen and experienced that, you can't help but really be changed. I can tell you another story that comes out of that church I was part of in Eastern Canada 9 years ago. There was a young woman who was part of the delegation that went to Urbana. And at Urbana, she felt God calling her to missions worldwide. Over the course of 9 years, she did all kinds of things to try to make that happen. Her church community never stopped praying for her and helping her and encouraging her. And next month, she's going to Tanzania to do full-time mission work with an agency. And it all started at Urbana 09 as she heard the call of God on her life. And she's going not alone, but she is going with all kinds of people in that church who've been prayerfully supporting her and will prayerfully support her as she goes. So it energizes churches for what people bring back, but I think it energizes churches as they watch people then go into the world. And the church members back home continue to be the prayer partners, the financial partners, holding up that person who's going. So in a sense, they're all going through that one person.
We often talk in this podcast about goers, those who will physically go to another place, and we talk about the senders.
That's right.
Those who will support in a whole bunch of different ways. Sometimes we think of financial support, that's part of it, but in many ways of loving and prayer, and Urbana will inspire all of these. Now, in just a moment, we're going to have Lynda share more about how Urbana can be helpful to a local church, maybe your local church. Just before we get to that, we'd like to share with you this missions resource that we hope would be helpful to you and your church.
Like you, Send International longs to share the gospel with the billions alive today who have never heard that God loves them. By living among the people we long to reach, Send workers are making disciples of Christ and establishing strong, reproducing communities of committed believers in about 20 countries. We've helped hundreds of churches and mission workers engage the unreached with the life-changing message of Jesus. To explore how Send can help you engage the unreached, visit send.org today. And now, back to today's conversation.
We are back with Lynda MacGibbon of InterVarsity Canada, who has been sharing with us about Urbana 18 coming up in December of this year, December 27th through 31st in St. Louis, Missouri. It's still possible to register, remember, at the website. Lynda, just share with us again some of the examples you have in your heart about how Urbana has impacted the lives of individuals and churches.
I think that another significant thing that happens at Urbana, and shouldn't be any surprise because Urbana is a global missions conference, but there will be many, many missionaries at Urbana. Now, they may be urban missionaries serving in some part of North America, but often they are missionaries serving all over the world. Sometimes they will come from closed countries, and the stories they tell aren't stories that people would easily hear. They're coming from places where the church is being persecuted. I remember when I went to Urbana in 79, so I was a 17-year-old student from a small town in Newfoundland, as you said, Mags. And one of the speakers was Helen Roseveare, who is a missionary name that many, many people will remember. She passed away about 2 years ago, I think. But I still remember Helen in the talk that she gave during a plenary session, telling us that God uses people one, by many, by many. That idea has never left me, that my life could actually be a ripple effect in this world for God's kingdom. And that if I made a decision to follow Jesus into whatever he was calling me to do, somebody else might make a decision and somebody else might make a decision after that. So I think, the missionaries who speak, the people who are working for the church all around and with the church all around the world speak. There will be something said that resonates with somebody there that's going to change them for a lifetime. I can give you another example of that from Urbana 06. Pastor Oscar Muri, who's a Kenyan pastor, speaking at that Urbana. And many people, when I talk to them about Pastor Banas, will reference his name. He had some hard things to say about the church in North America and challenged us to consider what we were avoiding, what we were not looking at, what perhaps we were becoming blind to in terms of the whole needs of the global world. And he asked this question. He said, the African church knows that it needs the American church. How does the church in North America need the African church? And again, I think that speakers like Oscar at Urbana open up our eyes to what's beyond the four walls of the church that we might be worshiping in locally and beyond the walls of our countries even, to say, oh, I have something to learn from my brothers and sisters around the world.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful part of our missiology, really, to learn from those who have become faithful disciples. Sometimes because maybe Westerners went to a place, the church has been planted, it has grown to maturity, and now it contributes as a mature member. What a beautiful cycle that the Lord sets up in this.
That's so true.
Yeah. Now, we've already mentioned the website, Lynda. It's easy to register. You can visit the website. There are helps to try and remove some of the barriers to help make transportation easier. Now, there's an early registration. If you're hearing this as a very fresh presentation, very fresh post in the podcast, when is the early bird available until, Lynda?
Until November 15th.
Okay.
So a little bit of time, but encouraging people to register as early as they possibly can. Yeah, you'll save $100 if you register before then.
I realize there will be people coming from all over the United States and Canada. You did mention that there's some special effort to help Canadians. Can you just quickly, lots of our listeners are not in Canada, but just quickly for the Canadians might be thinking about this. It's too far to go to St. Louis, isn't it?
It is not too far to go to St. Louis.
Good.
We will have delegates from St. John's, Newfoundland and northern British Columbia and all parts in between. We organize a series of buses that leave from Montreal, southwestern, southeastern Ontario as well. There are buses that often, as you mentioned, get organized from BC, carloads of people who go, and then there are discount flights available. And that's on the Urbana website. So as people are booking flights, some airlines in the United States are actually offering discounts. So there are codes available for that. We are also quite actively right now raising scholarship money to help students go to Urbana. So lots of InterVarsity staff are out speaking in churches and encouraging people to think about sending from their churches. So there's lots of help available to help people get there.
Well, Lynda, lots of things you have helped just kind of give illustrations of. It's really encouraging to hear it. It's building energy. I'm excited for this conference, just thinking about it again.
Perhaps you better rethink and maybe you'll go to this one again.
That's right. Well, here I thought I was making space for someone to take my spot there.
Oh, it's plenty of space. It's a big dome.
That's true. That's true. Many of our listeners are leaders in local churches, Lynda. And if you could imagine that you have the opportunity to speak to the missions committee in a church or another leader, maybe a pastor in a church, if you could say one thing to these leaders now, what would you say?
I have a question for them. Who in your church will attend Urbana? Is there a group of 3, 5, 15, or 25 who could actually go together? Imagine what could happen in your church if a group of people spent 5 days worshiping, learning, praying, seeking God together. God equips and changes churches through Urbana. Our theme for Urbana 18 is faithful witness. The question we're exploring is, what does it look to be a faithful witness in Canada, in the United States, and in every country of the world?
Faithful witness. Beautiful.
Yeah. Who in your church will attend?
Now, Lynda, if any of our listeners would like to reach out and learn more, maybe contact you or someone on the team, what's the best way to be in touch?
Best way to be in touch with us is just from direct email, and people can write to us at info@ivcf.ca. So that's the initials of InterVarsity Christian Fellowship.
I was on the website earlier today and I read this: hear the call, worship the King of Kings, and live changed, with the theme of faithful witness. Lynda, thanks so much for spending this time with us today and helping to share with our audience what the Lord has done in the past and looking forward to what He will do in this coming conference.
Thank you, Mags. I've really enjoyed chatting with you.
Well, that concludes our conversation with Lynda. Thank you for joining us today. Remember that you can find show notes for this episode at globalmissionspodcast.com, including links to the urbana.org website that we talked about today. If you're still wondering about this conference and what all it includes and what it's like, there are many recordings on the website. In particular, I would mention a tab that's over toward the right-hand side on the homepage called Past Urbanas. There you can learn more by watching and listening what you might expect at this conference. It might help you determine your next steps for this upcoming Urbana 18. As our regular listeners know, we're always glad to hear from you with suggested topics or interviews you'd like us to consider. And if you enjoyed this episode, we invite you to subscribe to the program in your favorite podcast app. We would sure appreciate a review as well on iTunes or whatever app you happen to be using for podcasts. That's all for today. This episode is brought to you by the Global Missions Toolbox and produced by Send International and the Jaffrey Center for Global Initiatives in collaboration with other like-minded agencies. On behalf of our team, thanks for listening. Join us again in 2 weeks when we'll continue to explore this grand adventure of being Christ's witnesses to the ends of the earth.